Our Money Mondays are brought to you by Genesis Gold Group. Go to BibleandGold.com today to claim your free copy of the Bible and Gold. All right, Alin, good to have you back on the show, brother. Thanks for joining me.
Yep, glad to be here again to continue our discussion about money.
Yes, man.
Today's episode is going to be a good one.
Yes, exactly. So our first episode of Money Mondays, which you can check out at our Substacks, ldcanada.substack.com. Go over there, check that out. You can get all our episodes over there. You're definitely going to want to do that. But basically, the first show, Alin, we talked about money. What is it? And what makes for good money, for sound currency, and why ours sucks, because it doesn't fulfill the criteria that goes into basic sound money. So now that we've looked at what is money, we've showed how fiat currency fails the basic tests for sound money. Today we want to talk about, well, what is a good medium of exchange? What is a good form of money? And what has historically been one of the greatest mediums of exchange, if not the greatest, throughout all of history? So we want to talk about specifically today on this episode why gold is that good medium of exchange, why God said that gold is good. So that is the topic of today. It's why gold is good money. So, Alin, what do we have to understand when it comes to gold? What is a principle that we need to really understand of why gold is good money and why we should care about the money that we use to make our market transactions?
Yeah, the first thing we have to realize is money, before we even talk about gold, this word, this concept, money, is not a morally neutral thing, okay? People think money is a morally neutral thing. It's just what it is, or even some would say it's a necessary evil, which is an interesting way of framing it. But it's not. Money is not a morally neutral thing. So what I mean by that is that how you use money is also not a morally neutral thing. But that's not what I'm talking about when I say money's not a morally neutral thing. What I'm talking about when I say that is that what you use as money is not morally neutral. Okay, so for example, we talked about fiat money last Monday, and we discussed how the properties of fiat money, the policies surrounding fiat money, the rules of fiat money are built on debt and are built on fraud and objectively immoral things, right? So God tells us, you shall not steal. Okay, pretty simple, pretty basic. You know, we teach our kids these things, and there's a reason why God told us not to steal, and it's because of this. It violates his character, okay? So money either reflects God's goodness and his character, or it will reflect the corruption of human beings that use it towards evil ends and corrupt it. Okay, so even the good money can be corrupted. Obviously, we talked a bit about that last week. But the first thing we have to understand is money is not morally neutral. Okay, so don't think, because people will say all the time, Alin, you talk too much about money. They'll quote the scriptures that talk about the love of money and how, a rich person will, it's like going through the eye of a needle, a camel going through the eye of a needle. And they'll quote all these passages to me and say, you talk too much about money, you're idolizing money, stop talking about money. Whereas it is true, you can idolize money and it can become an idol. Yes, obviously that's true. But that doesn't mean it's neutral, right? Just because you can idolize a thing doesn't mean you should ignore it, or it doesn't even mean it's bad. For example, we can idolize many good things. We can idolize our marriages. We can idolize our families. Well, we can idolize leaders who are doing a good job. Like say you have a pastor who's doing a great job. You can idolize that pastor in an idolatrous way. And it's not his fault, right? I mean, that's on you. And so it's the same with money. Money's not morally neutral. It is a gospel issue that we need to tackle.
Yes.
So first and foremost, that's what I would say. Money is not moral. We need to tackle it as a gospel issue.
Yeah, money is not morally neutral, and I think that's really, really important. It's how are we going to use money? Money's going to be used as a necessary tool in, voluntary free market exchange. What monies are we going to use, and in which ways are we going to use them? Are we going to use them to glorify God in obedience to Him, or are we going to use monies that neither obey His law, reflect His goodness, are according to His principles, and ultimately not loving our neighbor, right? So these are really important things. Money, because money is such a powerful tool, and because it's involved in so much of our lives, that's why the Bible is full of passages on how we spend our money, on economics, we've talked about valuation being subjective. But the object, which is God alone, He actually tells us how we ought to orient our valuations and everything like that in the basic principles of them. So money doesn't escape that. We're going to use it. Are we going to use it righteously for the glory of God, or are we going to use it for our corrupt ends, right? That's the question that's before us. So that leads us to, like I said, the divine valuation, right? So Genesis 2:12, maybe you can walk us through Genesis 2:12 and why we actually know from the God who is living, who has an objective standard, who has the proper valuation of all things, because He's all-knowing, what He thinks about gold as a medium of exchange.
Okay, so Genesis chapter 2 is an interesting chapter, because in Genesis chapter 1, we get a sort of broad view of creation. Genesis 1 is written in a very meticulous fashion, very structured, very organized. There's lots of patterns that we pick up on in Genesis chapter 1. Obviously, the days, right? It's broken up into day segments, and each days are put in place strategically. And so what I mean by that is they correspond. If you've ever noticed the days of Genesis 1, day 1 corresponds to day 3, day 4 to day 5, day 2 to day 5, and day 3 to day 6. So these, if you put them side by side in a column, 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 6, you'll see they correspond with one another. And there's a lot of patterns like that. So it's very, very intentionally written. And one of the patterns we see is this pattern of good. God calls a bunch of stuff good. And we get to Genesis 2, and what happens in Genesis 2 is we're getting a sort of a zeroed in. If creation was like a camera, we're zooming in now on certain things in creation. And we get, to talk about God making Adam and Eve and all this other stuff. And one of the things that zooms in on with the tree of life, of course. But after the tree of life, we get this passage about the river flowing out of Eden. And then the narrator starts to tell us about some land where the Garden of Eden is around. And, the first time you read this, you think, well, okay, so what's the point of this? Why does God want me to know about these rivers, where they're flowing out of, and some lands that they pass through and so forth? What's the point of all this? Well, it's interesting because once you get to verse 12, you get this passage. It says, verse 11, we need to go back to verse 11, actually. It says that there's a land called Havilah where there is gold. Okay, why did I need to know that? Well, verse 12 kind of ups the ante. It says, and the gold of that land is good. So if we remember about our patterns in Genesis, we should immediately perk up now, because God is saying it is good. Now, in verse 9, we're introduced to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So there's that word good again. So we're seeing this thread throughout creation now of good, 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 good. And then we're told, of all the things God has just told us is good, leading up to this passage, verse 12, the last thing I expected was gold. I did not expect to read that. Where there's a land of Havilah where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. Why does God put that passage there? Why is God telling us? Why does the Holy Spirit inspire the author of Genesis to slow down the narrative, to give us this passage that almost looks out of place? Why do I have to know this? I mean, really think about this. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil, yeah, that's an important detail for the narrative of Scripture, right? The creation of the world, that's an important detail. It's not good for man to be alone. Yeah, that's an important detail for us. But why do we have to know that the gold in a place called Havilah is good? That should cause us to stop and ponder for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Because God is making, like you said, a divine valuation statement. Just like he has for the prior chapter and a half before we even got to this passage.
Mm-hmm.
We by the time you've read the Genesis 2:12, you've already been acquainted with divine valuation statements.
Yeah, it's all over all over the creation account. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but then we get to this one, and it's a bit peculiar. I mean, maybe it's not for you, but for me it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I said, before this, everything else kind of made sense. Yeah, I want to know about creation. I want to know about human relationships. I want to know about good and evil, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's all really important stuff.
But why does he start pointing towards precious metals like onyx stone and gold and all these things? Yeah,
it seems to come out of left field.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to come out of left field. But the more I have meditated and pondered this passage, the more I realized, no, it actually didn't come out of left field. This is just my own, folly of not understanding what's happening here. Mm-hmm. What's happening here is God is making a value statement about gold because human interaction in economics, money, is very consequential and important to the flourishing of human beings, which is the whole point, right? Genesis 1, 26 to 29 is telling us about how God made man in his image and given us a dominion mandate. Part of the dominion mandate is being fruitful and multiplying. I mean, that's kind of the thing that undergirds it all, multiplication. And you can't multiply too fast before you realize, oh, wow, there's some complexities here now. We need to scale this thing. And that's why we're told that the gold of that land is good. And he talks about the other precious metals and so forth as a way of showing us that money is not something that is neutral, like I said, in that it affects our ability to fulfill that initial mandate.
Yeah. And
why it's so important.
I think it also just shows the abundance that God also has created, right? He's created Adam, he's put him in the land, he's created a world that is latent with potentiality, right? It's bursting at the seams with goodness, and it's man's glory to take dominion over it and to search those things out and to effort and labor towards extracting and pulling out the potential that God's put into creation, that he's built into it, because that whole passage comes in that context of, out of the land was coming forth these great things, right? Pleasant trees, food that's good, water that's good, that's to the health of the body and for the flourishing of man. So it's within this context of abundance and flourishing within the context of fulfilling that dominion mandate that you're talking about, Alin, that God makes this objective evaluation. And because God, the subject, is the only true, perfect object, he's the one who can make those objective valuations, that when God says something is good, it truly is good. So we better perk up when he's making those valuations. So we have it also, as a divine account that gold is good.
Yeah, but also think about this. I'll ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Food is good for the body.
Mm-hmm.
Water is good for the body.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. Oxygen is good for the body. Trees, and so all these things God is making, we can look at it and go, oh, I know what that's good for. Water, I drink that. That's good. Plants, we eat that. That's good. Trees, a lot of use cases for trees.
Yes.
So there's all these different things that we can immediately, almost intuitively, start to. It's not hard for us to know what they're good for. So let me ask you, what is gold good for, though? Right? Because God says gold is good. Okay, but for what? You can't eat it.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to really build like a house out of it. It's. I mean, I guess you could, but.
It's too rare. It's too difficult to extract and refine, and yeah.
So like you're not going to eat it. You can't drink it. You're not going to build a house out of it. So what is it good for? I mean, that's the question we have to ask, right?
Yeah.
What is it good for? Because if God says it's good, then therefore there must be a good use case for it, right? It doesn't say that. It doesn't say, God doesn't say like it's good to look at, although it is.
Yeah,
it is. If you ever held like a 0.999 piece of gold in your hand and looked at it, it's sort of like fire, right? You know how when there's a campfire, kind of can't look away, you get kind of lost in the flames. It has that sort of same effect. It's just you look at it, you go, wow, how can something be so clean, so so shiny, so pure, like no defects or whatever. You get lost in it. And so if God has said it's good, well, then that means it must be good for something. So what is that something? Well, that something is human transactions, human scaling, human commerce, human time and energy.
Yeah.
What else could it be? What else could it be good for?
Yeah. No, exactly. And I think it goes, you mentioned the aesthetic purpose of it too, and it just goes to show that God isn't just, right, we don't have a God who's very stoic. He's concerned about human flourishing, and that goes to economic flourishing and aesthetics and beauty and all these things, right? He's concerned about those aspects of life. We don't just have to live as monastic monks, hold up, living the aesthetic life where we just beat ourselves into oblivion and we can't enjoy creation. No, God's actually given us these things to enjoy, to beautify, and also as a store of value to transact. So I think this is really, really important stuff, because let's be honest, until today, most people probably just read Genesis 2:12 and they've never stopped and thought about it for 1 second. They're just like, God's just describing, the land that was there, and I haven't thought about it for 2 seconds. But no, what we have to understand is that gold is good, and that God has determined it good. He's made his evaluation of it before sin enters the picture, right? So gold is by God's account, something that he's created for a purpose. He's created it good for man to flourish and take dominion over his creation, according to his word. And he did all this prior to his sin entering the picture. So it's not as though gold is somehow this side of the fall, a necessary evil, as you've talked about, Alan. But no, it's a part of God's good creation. And what does that actually have to say to us as Christians who are trying to think through economics here and now?
Yeah. So again, like you said, it wasn't as if humans fell into sin and, became greedy and then found gold, right? It wasn't that after sin, the sinfulness of man found this thing called gold and became greedy and then said it was good, right? Because then we might have an argument to say, see, look, it's only because the sin in the heart of men that they made the value statements that it's good because now they want to hoard it or whatever, right? You can make a million different arguments, but you can't, because the valuation statement came before sin, and it didn't come from man, right? It wasn't a man saying, it wasn't Adam saying, oh wow, I like this thing, this metal is nice. It was God saying it's good. And so that's very important, because it gives us the proper perspective and the right biblical foundation for viewing money. If God said gold is good, and if the only use case we can find for it is transacting. Now, of course, now we know gold is also a good conductor of electricity. It has industrial use cases as well that we've discovered. But for most of human history, it was used as money. And so the main use case is a store of value and money transacting for human beings. And if that value statement was made before sin, then we know that economic activity in principle is not sinful. And this is so important for us to come to terms with. Now, maybe not for us, because it's not really something we like. I don't really think it's in my mind, it's not a sin to transact. But how many people have you come in contact with in your Christian circle that maybe subconsciously do think that, right? They do think charging money for or expecting money for something maybe is sinful. Like, oh, I don't want to be greedy or anything like that. Or they think, these billionaires are greedy. That's why they're billionaires, or something like that. I've met some Christians where it's like they won't take money. You try to bless them and they'll say, no, this kind of false humility. They come to do a favor for you. You want to pay them. You ever experienced something like this?
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. Because we tend to think of like money as like you said, a necessary evil, something part of the saculum, right? It's earthly, yeah. It's secular, because we're spiritual beings floating off in the ether somewhere. We can't be corrupted by money because we have an improper view of it to begin with. Yeah. Yeah.
So this needs to be wiped from our character. Okay.
Yes.
We need to view money as in its proper light, as a good gift from God, to be used in the way in which God determines it to be used. And so now, I used to kind of have that view too, but there was a pastor I had, and he gave me a word of wisdom that stuck with me forever. And maybe theologically, this isn't the most accurate way to view it, but I think in practice it makes sense. And when somebody wants to give you money, accept it and be thankful, because if you don't, then you might be withholding a blessing from them. I know that sounds kind of prosperity gospel-ish, but if you really think it through, it makes sense. If I want to bless you with something, okay, Jesus
Mm-hmm.
said it's more blessed to give than receive, right? And so if I want to give, and the Word of God's telling me I'll be blessed if I give. Now, I don't mean like give me 10 grand and God will give you 100 grand miraculously, like not
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But if it's more blessed to give than receive, then if you don't receive, then how can I be blessed? Right? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's arrogant to not receive, it's greedy to not give. And so receive and give well. Be a good
Mm-hmm.
giver, be a good receiver. The only way this mindset of proper person to person, peer to peer transacting with money being a good gift from God gets instilled in you is if you understand the origin.
Mm-hmm.
It came before sin. It's
Yeah.
not a matter of sin.
Mm-hmm.
It's money. It's a gift from God.
And actually,
And so,
Alan,
yeah, go ahead.
when you talk about this being a good gift from God, that's actually reflected in the medium of itself when we're talking about gold, because gold actually has within it properties that reflect, that image the goodness of God. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what are some divine attributes that are reflected in the properties inherent in gold.
Yeah. That's a good point. So gold, we talk about it in terms of scarcity. Now, of course, scarcity could be kind of subjective, right? Because what is scarce, what is abundant. For one person it might be one thing, for one person it might be another. But the idea is there's only so much of it, right? Like you can't make gold. I mean, this is the millennia temptation of man to
Yeah,
do the
the
alchemy.
alchemy. Yeah,
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 yeah.
to do the alchemy. Now I know people are still trying to do it, and maybe we get to a point where we might be able to create something like gold, similar to it, but so far we haven't been able to.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this limited amount of it. There's so much of it. It needs to be proof of work. And even if they did, it's like you still have to do the work to. It's not just going to be like, let there be gold or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's scarce. There's a limited amount of it, and you need to work to get it. It's incorruptible. Now that might sound like, whoa, that's God is incorruptible, gold is incorruptible, but obviously we're not saying gold is God, but what we're saying is
No.
it reflects
Mm-hmm.
those attributes. And so
Yeah.
you can't corrupt gold in the sense that you can't destroy it. You
Mm-hmm.
can't it doesn't rust. It just remains in its state. And like I said, it does have a lot of industrial use cases. And we need to appreciate beauty as well. Um, like I said, gold is a beautiful substance. If you're listening or watching this and you've never held a pure piece of gold in your life, go to a local coin shop. Just Google a coin shop,
Mm-hmm.
go there, and just hold a piece of gold in your hand. Just
Yeah.
look at it.
Mm-hmm.
It might sound silly, but seriously, go try this. And when
Mm-hmm.
you do, maybe you won't be impressed. Maybe you're a better person than me. But when I saw it for the first time, I was like, wow, there's something about this.
Well,
This thing is beautiful. Like I had a guy put a 1 ounce gold bar in the offering
mm,
plate before,
oh wow,
and
okay.
yeah, and
Hello.
it was a
That's a big
strange thing.
tithe.
Yeah, well, it was still a big tithe at the time, but it was like 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh yeah, so not quite as big.
Yeah. So he put it in there, and this is when we used to still take offerings with a basket, and
Yeah.
who does that anymore? But and it came around, and I remember the woman who was doing the counting and of the offering, and she looked in the bucket and like had a weird look on her face. I'm like, that's strange. But I kind of waited till the end of the service, and she comes up to me and she's like, Pastor, somebody put this in the offering plate, and she hands me a bar of gold. And I was like, is this a bar of gold? And she goes, yeah, I think that's a bar of gold. And I'm like, what the heck? This is weird.
Yeah.
But then I just looked at it and I was like, wow, this is actually, I'm thinking to myself, this is really nice.
Mm-hmm.
But then I thought, well, what do we do with this? You know, how do we account for this? And like, it's
Yeah.
how much is this worth? You know, and so
Mm-hmm.
forth. But just holding it there for the moment, I was like, wow, this is, because you hear about gold, you see gold on TV maybe or whatever, or you see a gold ring or something.
Yeah.
But when you hold like an ounce of gold, and it's almost, you know how Scripture talks about the streets of gold that are transparent.
Mm-hmm.
When I read that in Revelation, I used to think, what do you mean transparent? But when you look at a pure piece of gold, it's almost like a mirror.
Mm-hmm.
It almost has this sort of transparent appearance where it's so clear. It's like a mirror that you can almost see through.
Well,
so go ahead, go to your local coin shop and just hold a piece of gold, and you'll understand this aesthetic beauty I'm talking about.
Well, and beyond beauty, you know, we even talked briefly about how gold is kind of, like you say, it's incorruptible. Well, it's kind of eternal in a sense. Like, it's obviously not eternal. God created it, but it's basically indestructible. That's an amazing, it's got some amazing properties to it that reflect, you know, the glory of God. And when we even talk about glory, you know, kavod, weightiness, heaviness, you hold gold and it looks like it's filled with glory, right? It's heavy, it's substantial, it's weighty, it's beautiful.
Very dense.
It's exceedingly dense, right? And in all these ways, these are reflections of God. Obviously, gold isn't God. It doesn't even hold a candle to his glory, but there is, you know, a beauty to it, right? And actually, the Psalms talk about the beauty of holiness, right? And God has set apart, has made gold holy for this purpose, right? You know, just to think of biblical language to attach to gold. So it's really, really a powerful substance. And I mean, if just a cursory look at history would say that this is something that human beings have been using for time in memoriam for this purpose. And gold fulfills all the attributes that we laid out in the first episode, right? It shows proof of work. It's scarce. It's divisible and portable. You know, some people would say, well, it's not as divisible or portable as other things. Well, that might be the case, but it is, regardless of, and there's definitely, as technology gets better and better, people have figured out ways to make it more portable and divisible.
Have you seen these gold backs?
Yeah.
I wish I had my wallet on me. I carry one everywhere I go. But there's these things called gold backs where it's like a bill. It's like a thin piece of gold. So thin, it looks like a dollar bill, and you can put it in your wallet. And it's the one I have is 1/1000th of an ounce of gold. And so, you know, with technology, we've been able to make it more divisible and more portable.
Yes, absolutely. It's fungible, it's durable, and it's verifiable. Literally all the properties of sound money, gold has them. And I think we said maybe fiat has two of them. You know, so in comparison to the money that we're using, gold is far greater. And I think that brings us to kind of the final point that we want to talk about is when we're talking about our dollar bills, when we're talking about fiat currency, paper or plastic money that's issued as a debt from our government, we're actually, Alan, when we're talking about money not being morally neutral, the medium of exchange not being morally neutral, when it comes down to it, we're accepting, you know, the product of man's fiat creation, or we're accepting the product of God's fiat creation, and that we have biblical evidence to know that he's given his truly right objective evaluation and said this is good. So that is what it boils down to, is fiat currency comes down to man's word, man's creation. Gold is what God's given us for exchange. So maybe you could riff off that and talk a little bit about why we ought to go one direction rather than the other.
Well, we have a choice. We have two competing fiats, right? We have man's fiat, or what I like to call carnal fiat, and we have God's fiat, or what I like to call divine fiat. So it's not a matter of not using fiat, right? It's a matter of choosing the right fiat. And this is the same with really anything we discuss. For example, I like to use the example of transgenderism. Now, you might be thinking, where did that come from? Talking about gold, now we're talking about transgenderism. Well, think about it.
Yeah.
We have the same choice. We have carnal fiat or God's fiat. So let's start with God's fiat. God's fiat says he made them male and female. Right? God's fiat says that he made man in his image. Male and female, he made them. So God has decreed authoritatively gender. We agree.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yes.
So we have one fiat, God's fiat. Then on the other hand, we have carnal fiat that comes and says, no, I disagree. I will declare my own gender. I will tell you what I am, and you must agree. Okay.
Man trying to create ex nihilo, right? Create genders or sexes out of nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Just out of their mind, just whatever, out of the ether of the depths of human depravity.
Yes. Replaying, the pride at the fall, right? The like that's essentially what that amounts to. Yeah.
Exactly. So we see even in the arena of gender, we have to choose between the competing fiats. So what fiat are you going to choose? Well, I hope you choose God's fiat, because God's fiat is not arbitrary. God's fiat is authoritative. God's fiat is real, and it's valuable objectively.
Yeah.
So bringing it back to money and gold, it's the same dichotomy here. What are you going to choose? God has given us his fiat decree. Sound money, good. Gold, good. All right?
Yeah.
And now we have man coming along and saying, well, we kind of like that, but it's a bit too constraining. We'd like to burst the bonds of that fiat and make our own money. Right?
Yeah.
We like that. We like gold, but it's just, we can upgrade it. We can do it better. Right? Our word is better. So we're going to create our own money, our own fiat, and we see how that's gone.
Yeah.
Through history. Not well.
Yeah.
So again, we'll just leave the listeners with this. This is your choice, right? God's fiat, divine fiat, or carnal fiat. I know which way I'm going to go. I'm going to trust God with his decree and what he says sound money is. And although we still live in this world where carnal fiat is dominating economic activity, we can still make the choice, whether even in that system, to be, the proverbial in the world but not of the world. Yeah. In the in terms of money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to point to the fact that because maybe we have people listening who are kind of balking at the Christian perspective that we're bringing to this discussion on economics, and what does faith have to do with economics? What does faith have to do with money? But we're literally talking about a system that is based off of fiduciary money. Like that's literally what fiat money is. That's what a fractional reserve banking system creates. It creates fiduciary money that has no value in and of itself, except for the fact that people believe by faith that banks are able to, take a paper note and exchange it for, some form of money. So the reason why it's important for us to have these discussions is because what we've talked about, money's not morally neutral. God cares about how we interact with our neighbors in the world and how we voluntarily exchange with them in fulfillment of the Dominion mandate. So money is necessary for the flourishing of man, for productive economic activity in the world that he created. He's given us a valuation that gold is good. So are we going to take God at his word? And like you said, Alin, trust in his fiat, in his word, in what he's declared to be good, and utilize that in our market transactions, having faith in God and him alone and his evaluation? Or are we going to put the valuation in man's fiat proclamations, in the faith in banks and this banking system and governments to declare things, to create ex nihilo new monies that don't have any of the properties of sound money, and we're still going to take them at face value. So who are we going to obey? Are we going to obey God or man in our economic activity? Well, if we're going to, love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love our neighbor as ourselves, we ought to be choosing to obey God, even when it comes to economic activity. And this is, Alin, how practical the scriptures are. The scriptures aren't pie in the sky, by and by. It's steak on the plate while you wait. That's the tangibility. That's the earthiness. That's the reality of how scripture is. It is always relevant to our situations and even our economic activity day by day by day by day. And that's why we're doing Money Mondays, because we want Christians to have a biblical perspective on the medium of exchange that's in their wallets that they're using day by day to transact with people, so we can have a better understanding of how we ought to do that with equal weights and measurements, because God abhors unequal weights and measurements, and we have a system built upon that. So for all those talking about Christian nationalism and political theories on how we could create a state that would best represent God and his command, we also have to think about money when we're doing that. So
I don't think we can even start the conversation before we deal with this.
No, exactly. And Alin, we're seeing it, man. The current central bank, big government, statist, post Bretton Woods world of financial systems, it's tearing at the seams, and everybody knows it. Anybody in finance knows it. It's an open secret. Japan right now is ready to fall apart because of all the debt. We're facing a crisis, and the only thing that is going to help us economically out of this crisis is thinking God's thoughts after him. And thankfully, he's told us, Alin, how he values economic activity.
Being in finance right now must be so stressful.
Oh, I know some guys who do.
The system. I was in a prayer meeting last week, our weekly prayer meeting with the church, and we were talking about this. And one of the brothers said something so profoundly simple that I think we miss: is the current financial system we have is unstable. That's the best word I can use. It's unstable, unpredictable, and it's becoming increasingly so that way. Mm-hmm. It's the volatility we're seeing in the stock market, for example, and stocks that were historically pretty stable. Mm-hmm. is like, it's just showing the cracks in the system. Yeah. And there was one company, what was it? It was like a department store. it did like 45% in a day. I'm like, what? Department stores don't move like meme coins. Right? Like, what's going on here? There's something strange going on. There's cracks being shown. There's instability in the market, and that's just showing us the instability of the underlying denominator, which is denominating the so-called value of that market, which is fiat money. And so, it's so important. And when the talks of Christian nationalism, and I was in those circles for a while, and I'm not against it by any means, but Jesus said something that I think we forget. He said, "You'll know a tree by its fruits." Does a good tree bear bad fruit? Does a bad tree bear good fruit? No, well, of course not. And I know that's in the context of disciples and not talking about money primarily, but the principle goes across the board. A good financial system will not produce bad fruit.
Yeah.
You can apply that to almost anything. And so what we're seeing today is a bad financial system, a bad tree bearing rotten fruits. And how do we think we're going to change our cultures? Do we really think we're going to change it by just forcing people to be more moral while living under this increasingly bad tree with bad incentives built into it? No, we need to take the scriptures at face value holistically. There's a reason God gave us these words.
Yeah. Exactly.
If you don't obey God in the realm of sexuality, what's going to happen? Bad things. Nobody disagrees. If you don't obey God in the realm of education, if you take God out of it, if you take the fear of the Lord out of it, what's going to happen? Bad things.
Yeah.
But for some reason, when it comes to money, and we say, if you don't obey God in terms of money, what's going to happen? People say, well, nothing, it's neutral.
Yeah. Which could be further from the truth, because God talks about that all over Scripture.
Exactly. Yeah. So why is money the only thing that is neutral when the Scriptures are abundantly clear that it's not?
Yeah, and this is
neutral. And it's not neutral in the sense that if you disobey God in this area, nothing bad will happen. No, bad things will happen, and bad things are happening.
Yeah.
So we need to get just as serious about this issue that we are on the other issues that we don't really have a problem with.
Yeah, and if, like you say, if you want a well-structured society where government is not intervening into every aspect of society, but is, basically upholding the structures of civilization that lead to human flourishing and promote good and punish wickedness, right? Within our concept of limited government under the authority of God, the referees have to play a ref according to the rules of the game. And they're not to actually play the game themselves, right? That would be unjust. And that's essentially what the state would act as, for all our Canadian friends who know very much about hockey. That's essentially the Christian view of what the state is there for. And they're there to uphold the structures of the game according to the rule book. And if you want a just and flourishing society where you have the proper structures where people can play within the game and succeed to the best of their abilities, you actually have to, as the state, enact and hold everybody accountable, even yourself, to playing by the right rules and the right mediums of exchange and having the even weights and measures. So as it intersects with Christian nationalists, like, it's obviously not a conversation that a lot of people have when we're talking about these things, but it's absolutely necessary in doing, because you can't really have one without the other. So this is why, though a lot of people might be like, why are you guys doing Monday Mondays? Like, why is this important for Liberty Dispatch to talk about? It's because it's so fundamental in human flourishing, in fulfilling the Dominion mandate, and in a well-ordered civil society. So that's why we're talking about it. That's why hopefully you will share these podcasts out with people, because we want to educate Christians in a very conversational way on what money is, why God cares about it, and to give a prescriptive view on how we ought to use money for the glory of God, according to his economic valuations that are 100% true and sure, and we ought to believe his word and take it at face value. So if you like our Money Monday series, be sure to subscribe, rate, review, interact with whatever we have going on wherever you're getting us from. Be sure to share this out to other people. Leave a comment down below on whether or not you have gold. Do you have any precious metals? What are your kind of thoughts on the monetary system? Let us know all that stuff. We love to hear from you. We'd love to interact with you, react to some of the things that you're saying. And just again, be sure to go over to the Bible. It's actually Bible and Gold. Scratch the BibleandGold.com. You can get a book that Alin himself wrote called The Bible and Gold, and it's brought to you by Genesis Gold Group. We would love you to go over there, get the more in-depth version of our podcast in that little primer, and it's going to be such a great resource for you for free. So get over there, BibleandGold.com. You won't regret it. Thanks again for tuning in to Money Mondays, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. God bless.
Liberty Dispatch has been brought to you by SDG Media. If you want to stay in touch with us and all things Liberty Dispatch, join our email list, or support the show, head over to ldcanada.substack.com.